At precisely 2:47 p.m. on a typical Tuesday afternoon, a phone shattered the calm in Lydia Martin's sleek corner office overlooking the city of Manchester. Lydia, 32, sat poised in her leather chair, a red pen poised over acquisition reports for a new urban renewal project. Beyond the glass, cranes dotted the skyline like giant metal herons, the hum of construction a constant backdrop to her focused world. The phone buzzed, an unknown number flashing. She answered. "Good afternoon, this is Victoria Collins from Elegant Occasions." The voice was syrupy, overly polished. "I'm calling about the Fletcher wedding scheduled for this Saturday." The name hit Lydia like a punch to the gut. Fletcher, her maiden name, the family she had severed ties with 3 years ago after being repeatedly dismissed and overshadowed. Her chest tightened before Victoria even delivered the blow. "I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news," Victoria continued, her tone shifting from rehearsed sweetness to icy dismissal. "You have been uninvited. The family insists you not be present. I'm sorry, but your attendance is unwelcome." The line went silent except for the persistent buzz of the fluorescent light above her. Lydia set the pen down, stared out at the city, and exhaled slowly. "That I understand," she said quietly. "Great," Victoria chirped, almost relieved. "That makes things easier. Honestly, I was told you might cause a scene. Have a nice day." Click. Lydia sat motionless for a moment. Then a laugh, sharp, unguarded, escaped her lips, echoing off the glass walls. They really had done it. Her own sister, Emma, had wielded the knife, excluding her from the wedding. The delicious irony? Emma's lavish celebration would be held at the Crestwood Manor, the city's premier wedding venue, which Lydia had secretly acquired 6 months earlier through her holding company, Martin Capital LLC. Her assistant, Tom, knocked and poked his head in. "Lydia, your 3 o'clock is here." She waved him off, still smiling faintly. "Cancel it. And bring me the file on Crestwood Manor. 20 minutes later. The phone buzzed again. Same number. "Miss Martin," Victoria's voice trembled. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know you owned the venue. We can't possibly move the wedding tomorrow, especially with the Fletchers involved. Please, can we work something out?" Lydia let the silence hang, listening to the frantic breathing on the other end. "Victoria," she said, voice as cool as the glass beneath her hand, "we need to talk." The Crestwood Manor rose majestically from 12 acres of manicured gardens in Didsbury, a charming suburb outside Manchester. The restored 1920s facade gleamed ivory against the afternoon sun. Rolling lawns stretched to the horizon, and inside, a grand ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers capable of hosting 300 guests. Lydia recalled the first time she toured the property. How the place whispered legacy and grandeur, the kind of stage where Manchester's elite sealed their social stories. She hadn't bought it for sentimentality. She'd bought it because the bookings promised millions in revenue, and here was Emma, the sister who had branded Lydia a family embarrassment, choosing Lydia's own manor for her fairy tale wedding. Victoria met her in the lobby, wringing her hands nervously. She was younger than Lydia had imagined, maybe 28, with glossy chestnut hair and a tight designer suit that screamed trying too hard. "Miss Martin, I can't apologize enough. Emma told me you weren't welcome and asked me to handle it discreetly. I had no idea you owned Crestwood." Lydia studied the woman's worried gaze. "What exactly did Emma say about me?" Victoria swallowed. "She called you the family disappointment. Said you left the family business for a failed startup and that your presence tomorrow would be embarrassing." Lydia laughed, but it was a dark, bitter sound. Failed startup? If only they knew. 3 years ago, Lydia had been the star analyst at Fletcher Financial Group, their father's firm. She had lived in that office, worked 60-hour weeks, her fingerprints on every major deal. Yet Marcus, her older brother, collected the praise. Ideas she pitched were dismissed. The same ideas from him were hailed as genius. Mistakes? Always hers to carry. The breaking point came with the city bond deal, the one that earned the firm £12 million in fees. Lydia built the models, structured the financing, carried the weight. Marcus took the bow. When she confronted their father, she was waved off. "You're being emotional, Lydia. Learn from your brother instead of competing," so she left. She took her savings, her contacts, and every ounce of resentment, and built something they never imagined. Victoria, she said, lowering herself into the chair opposite the young planner. Tell me everything about tomorrow's wedding. Victoria flipped open a thick folder, fingers trembling. 250 guests. Ceremony in the Rose Garden at 4 p.m. Cocktail hour on the terrace. Reception in the ballroom. The Fletchers are sparing no expense. This is easily an £180,000 event. Emma was very clear. My sister is not to be allowed anywhere near this wedding. Lydia's eyes narrowed, but her voice was steady. Victoria, call Emma. Tell her there's been a problem with the venue. Double booked. Victoria's eyes went wide. But there isn't another venue in Manchester that can handle this size on less than 24 hours notice. I know, Lydia said softly. A beat. Then horror. Miss Martin, you can't be serious. Make the call. 15 minutes later, Lydia's phone buzzed again. Emma's voice was sharp and furious. What do you mean the venue is double booked? Do you realize how much we've spent? The flowers alone were £15,000. This is a disaster. No mistake, Lydia said, calm as still water. Victoria called you because I asked her to. What? You own Crestwood Manor? That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money, Emma spat. You're barely scraping by with your little computer business. If only she knew. Check the property records. Martin Capital LLC purchased Crestwood Manor 6 months ago. Silence. Then, even if it's true, you wouldn't cancel my wedding. You're not that cruel. I'm not cruel, Lydia said. I'm just not interested in hosting events for people who think I'm the family embarrassment. This is insane. I'm calling Dad. Please do. The line went dead. Lydia stared at her reflection in the glass. For the first time in years, the power balance had shifted, and she wasn't going to flinch. Less than 20 minutes later, her phone rang again. The voice was colder, sharper. Her father's. Lydia, what the hell is going on? She leaned back in her chair, measuring the silence. Hello, Dad. It's been nearly 2 years since we last spoke. How are you? Don't play games. Emma's hysterical, saying you own a wedding venue and are threatening to sabotage her wedding. Tell me it's not true. It's true. I own Crestwood Manor, and as the owner I choose which events to host. Silence. Finally, you own Crestwood Manor? How? You left Fletcher Financial with nothing. I had more than savings. Contacts, knowledge, and drive. And talent. She paused, voice sharp. Remember the Millennium Project? The city's £200 million cultural district financing? That was my deal. I built relationships, negotiated terms, structured financing. Marcus signed the papers and took the credit. Another silence. And the Patterson Industrial Acquisition? Another £15 million in fees? Mine too. I built the models, pitched the board. Marcus just presented my work. Her father's breath rattled. For 3 years, I carried your business while you and Marcus took the credit, he exhaled. You couldn't have afforded Crestwood Manor. It's worth at least £8 million. She glanced at the folder Tom had dropped earlier. Martin Capital owns 17 commercial properties in Greater Manchester, worth roughly £180 million. We hold majority stakes in 3 developments breaking ground next year. And we've made an offer to buy the Fletcher Financial Group building. Silence. You're trying to buy our building? I already made the offer. Your landlord seemed interested, said. Fletcher Financial is 3 months behind on rent. A long pause. What do you want, Lydia? I want respect. I want Emma to apologize for uninviting me, for calling my business a failure, for treating me like I never mattered. And I want you all to stop pretending I'm nothing because I chose to succeed outside your shadow. If she apologizes, she gets her dream wedding at Crestwood Manor. If not, Lydia turned toward the window, the city spread below like a chessboard. She spends the next 18 hours scrambling for another venue. This is blackmailed, and oh, Lydia corrected. Business. The line went dead. The clock ticked toward evening as Lydia prepared for the wedding day. She chose a navy silk dress that draped elegantly from her shoulders, pearl studs catching the light with subtle promise. Her hair was pulled back smooth, simple, revealing the graceful curve of her neck. She slipped on heels that clicked softly on marble and tucked her phone into a clutch filled with lists no one would see. Outside, the gardens of Crestwood Manor whispered with the promise of celebration. White chairs fanned in perfect arcs in the rose garden. Lantern hooks lined the paths like sentinels. Blush peonies wove through climbing vines on the pergola. Lydia walked the grounds once more, feeling the weight of the day ahead as guests arrived. She found her place. Third row, aisle seat, her presence folded into the scene like a shadow. She was no longer the family embarrassment. Tonight, she was something else. But somewhere in the edges of the garden, under the glow of lantern light, a storm was gathering. And Lydia could feel it in the tightening of her chest, the flicker of her phone as an unknown number buzzed once more. Asterisk, you always wanted them to see you. Asterisk, and now, they finally would. The soft murmur of guests settling into their seats floated through the warm spring air as Lydia took a slow breath beneath the pergola. The blush peonies twined delicately around the lattice overhead, their petals catching the golden light and brushing against her bare arms. A subtle invitation to notice, just enough to stir a quiet heat beneath her navy silk dress. The fabric clung gently to her frame, the slit along the side revealing just a flash of calf as she shifted her weight. Her pearl studs caught the light with discreet elegance, a whisper of sophistication rather than showiness. She tucked a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear, her lips curving into a faint, enigmatic smile. Tonight, she was part of the story, but not the one they expected. Victoria Collins appeared nearby, cheeks flushed from nerves but her posture impeccably straight. "Lydia," she whispered, then corrected herself. "Miss Martin, thank you again for your understanding yesterday. It really helped." Lydia's smile deepened, a flicker of warmth in her eyes. "Mercy is a big word for someone who likes to keep her head above water," she murmured, voice low enough that only Victoria could hear. Victoria laughed nervously, then leaned closer. "There's something you should know. The order to uninvite you? That was Emma's doing. But there was a second call early this morning, from a man I didn't recognize. Calm, measured. He said it would avoid disruption if you stayed away." Lydia's eyes narrowed. "And this mystery man? Did he give a name?" Victoria shook her head, voice dropping. "No. But he knew the schedule, the timeline. Someone close." Lydia's gaze flicked toward the shadowed terrace where, just moments ago, she'd glimpsed her brother Marcus standing beneath a towering oak. His tie was perfectly knotted, but his expression unreadable, lips pressed into a hard line as he stared down at his phone. The old sting of humiliation flared briefly in Lydia's chest, then cooled like ice sliding over a hot pan. "Information is oxygen," she said softly. "Panic is gasoline. I intend to keep breathing." The ceremony began with a hush, the officiant's voice weaving ancient promises into the fragrant air. Lydia watched Emma glide down the aisle, all lace and light, a vision of joy that seemed to radiate from her very bones. Emma's gaze found Lydia's in the third row, her mouth parting in surprise, then softening. She broke away from her bridesmaids like a child remembering how to run barefoot. "You came?" she whispered, bouquet trembling. "Of course," Lydia replied, voice steady. "You look beautiful." "Lydia," Emma breathed, the name no longer a weapon. "Thank you for making this simple," Lydia said, though simple was the furthest thing from the truth. Emma nodded and returned to her place, the music swelling as the first vows were spoken. The reception sparkled with understated opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen stars, their light fracturing into prisms across the polished oak floors. Servers moved with practiced grace, balancing trays of champagne flutes that caught the candlelight like captured fire. Lydia drifted along the edges, a quiet observer. She was intercepted near the bar by a woman in an emerald green dress, satin that hugged curves with the ease of a second skin, neckline plunging just enough to tease without revealing too much. "Lydia," the woman said, pressing a manicured hand to Lydia's elbow. "We met at the Riverview planning meeting. You asked the only sensible question in the room." Lydia smiled, fingers brushing the woman's wrist lightly. "I try." The woman introduced herself as Charlotte Evans, a vice president at a family office known for discreet, patient investments. When she slipped a business card into Lydia's clutch, She covered the printed number with her thumb and wrote another beneath it. "This is the number I actually answer," Charlotte said with a wink. "Call me Wednesday. 2 more chance conversations followed. A structural engineer who'd read a paper Lydia had published under a pseudonym, and a gallery owner seeking a sponsor for a cultural district expansion. Business cards slipped into her clutch like small white boats, each one a potential thread into a wider network. Then her phone buzzed, an unknown number. Asterisk, you always wanted them to see you. Asterisk, the tone was casual but carried an undercurrent of menace. Lydia's eyes scanned the terrace, the ballroom, the clusters of guests laughing and swirling in silk and tuxedos. Marcus stood at the far end, back turned, leaning close to Victoria. His smile was too sharp, too practiced. She typed a single word back. Asterisk, who? Asterisk, the typing dots flickered, then vanished. Lydia saved the number under a name only she would recognize. Asterisk, watcher asterisk, and slipped the phone into her clutch. The evening's rhythm deepened as the band shifted into jazz standards. Victoria approached, her composure regained but eyes shadowed with unease. Keep everything tight, Lydia instructed quietly. No surprises. Victoria hesitated. Marcus asked about ownership. I didn't tell him, but he suspects. Let him suspect, Lydia said with a sly smile. Suspicion is the first step to fear. Victoria nodded, relief flickering in her gaze as she melted back into the crowd as speeches began. Lydia watched from the sidelines. Her father, tall and imposing, rose with a glass in hand. His words were polished, carefully measured. Gratitude, anecdotes, safe ground. He didn't look her way, but Lydia could feel his gaze like a weight pressing against her back. She slipped outside onto the terrace, the cool night air a balm against her skin. Lanterns glowed softly, petals stirred by a gentle breeze. Her phone vibrated again. Asterisk, they see you now, but do you see them? Asterisk, a chill snaked down her spine. She turned to find her father stepping from the shadows. His jacket slung over one shoulder, eyes weary but searching Lydia. He said quietly, "May I have a word?" She nodded, stepping further into the night. Under the lantern's amber glow, the city sprawled behind them. A sea of lights, promises, and unspoken truths. I owe you an apology, he said, voice stripped of pretense. For underestimating you. For letting Marcus take credit. For making you feel you had to leave to prove yourself. Lydia studied him, searching for the familiar arrogance. But tonight it was gone. You suspected Marcus was stealing your deals, he nodded. And you didn't stop him. I thought it was character building. That you'd fight harder. She let the words hang like stones. What I really thought, he admitted, was that Marcus deserved it more. Because he's the heir. And you were just my daughter. The words landed hard, but at least they were honest. You made your choice. And I made mine. I built something without you, without Marcus. He looked at her. Eyes softened. I see that now. Lydia pulled out her phone, flicked it on, and turned the screen toward him. Figures glowing in pale blue. Martin Capital is worth more than Fletcher Financial. More than the Fletchers. More than anyone in that ballroom. His eyes widened. How? One deal at a time, without anyone stealing credit. Laughter drifted from the ballroom, a fragile thread tying past and present. He pressed his palms to the stone rail, head bowed. What happens now? Lydia smiled, sharp and sure. Emma has a beautiful wedding. Tomorrow you wake up to a world where your daughter is a CEO you can't ignore. He nodded slowly. Maybe we can talk business. S equals, she added. He smiled. A tired, genuine curve. S equals. But from the corner of her eye, Lydia caught a shadow slipping away. Marcus, watching, calculating, the storm in his eyes gathering strength. And the game was just beginning. The ballroom buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses as Lydia re-entered. The polished oak floor gleaming beneath the crystal chandeliers like a sea of stars. Emma and Bradley floated through their first dance, smiles perfect and curated. But Lydia knew better. Beneath the surface, every smile carried a story, and every story had its cracks. She drifted toward the bar, where the scent of cedar and aged whiskey mingled, and Marcus appeared beside her, stepping from the shadows like a storm ready to break. His tailored suit hugged his lean frame, the faintest smirk playing at the corner of his lips, eyes glinting with a sharpness that never failed to unsettle her. Well, that was quite the show, he drawled, voice smooth but edged with something darker. You must be proud. Lydia turned slowly, meeting his gaze without flinch. Proud of Emma? Absolutely. His laugh was low, mocking. Don't play modest. You orchestrated half this night. Power outage fixed too neatly, speeches suspiciously short. Classic Lydia, moving pieces from behind the curtain. Admit it. And you? She countered, arching an eyebrow. Always lurking in the wings, pulling strings, hoping no one notices your hand. His eyes glittered dangerously. Careful. Some of us hold secrets that could topple your little empire. The words hung heavy, a challenge wrapped in silk. What secrets, Marcus? Lydia's voice dropped to a whisper. Threaten me with specifics, or don't bother, he smirked. Then vanished into the crowd like smoke, leaving a cold unease in his wake. Later, as the band shifted into a slow jazz number, Lydia found Victoria again. The young planner's face was pale, composure cracked just enough to reveal the storm beneath. Keep everything tight, Lydia said quietly.
No surprises, Victoria hesitated.
Marcus asked about the ownership. Suspects. Let him suspect, Lydia replied with a faint smile. Suspicion is the first step toward fear. Victoria nodded, relief flickering in her eyes as she melted back into the crowd. The evening deepened, and Lydia wandered through clusters of guests. City planners debating zoning laws, developers discussing lakeside projects, and a gallery owner whispering about cultural district expansions. Business cards slipped into her clutch like small white boats, each a potential thread in the tapestry she was weaving. She stepped onto the terrace for air, the garden lamps glowing softly, petals brushing against the night breeze. Her phone buzzed again. Asterisk, they see you now, but do you see them? Asterisk, a chill traced down her spine. Behind her, footsteps approached. I've been thinking about what you said earlier. Her father's voice broke the silence, low and stripped of pretense. Respect. What happens now? She turned, meeting his tired eyes. Henderson Financial isn't what it used to be, he continued. Cash flows tight. Markets have changed. Your methods. They work. He paused, searching her face. You've built something stronger than I ever imagined. Bigger. Smarter. I'd be a fool not to admit it. A part of Lydia wanted to revel in the confession, another to laugh at the bitter irony. Instead, she stayed still. What are you asking? A partnership, he said carefully. Henderson Financial and Martin Capital. Projects, developments. If you wanted it as equals, she studied him. The arrogance softened by desperation. I'm willing, she said finally, on one condition. He raised an eyebrow. That I'm not your daughter seeking approval. I am the CEO of Martin Capital. If we work together, it's because the numbers make sense. Not bloodlines. He exhaled. A reluctant agreement. Understood. They stood side by side, the city lights flickering behind them like distant promises. Inside, applause rose as Emma took the stage, voice steady, eyes glowing. She thanked the guests, her gaze flicking briefly to Lydia. A silent exchange of gratitude and regret. Later, near the cloakroom, Emma found Lydia alone. Her gown trailed behind her, lace catching the light, face flushed with exhaustion and exhilaration. Lydia, she said softly, reaching out. Thank you. For everything. For not letting me ruin this. You didn't ruin anything, Lydia replied, steady. You learned that's enough. Emma bit her lip, eyes glistening. I'll never forget tonight. And I'll never forgive myself for before. Lydia placed a hand on her sister's shoulder, grounding them both. Tonight wasn't about me. It was about you and Bradley. Remember that. Emma blinked, then surprised her with a tight hug, the kind only sisters who'd weathered storms could share. To be why the time the last guests trickled out, only family and staff remained. Marcus appeared, smirk in place, eyes sharp. Well played, he said smoothly. Power outage resolved too neatly. Speeches suspiciously brief. Classic Lydia. She faced him squarely. And you? Always backstage, pulling strings, hoping no one sees. His gaze hardened, careful. Some secrets could bring your empire down. What secrets, Marcus? She challenged. Or is that just your version of a bedtime story? He smirked, then melted into the shadows, leaving unease lingering. Outside, the gardens whispered in the night. Lydia's phone buzzed again. Asterisk, you're not the only one who knows where the bodies are. Asterisk, her pulse steadied, but a cold knot tightened. Someone else was watching. Someone who'd been waiting. Not all enemies wore familiar faces. The city lights flickered, the night deepened, and Lydia tucked the phone away, smile curling at her lips. They wanted a game they'd forgotten she'd been playing for years. Tomorrow, she'd be CEO, partner, equal. But tonight, she was the woman they never saw. The last strains of music faded as the grand ballroom emptied, leaving echoes of laughter and whispered farewells to mingle with the soft rustle of silk and the steady tap of heels on polished floors. Lydia lingered near the carved oak bar, her fingers tracing the rim of a nearly empty glass, the coolness grounding her amid the swirling tides of the night. Behind her, the heavy velvet curtains framed the moonlit gardens, shadows slipping between lantern-lit paths like secrets waiting to be uncovered. The scent of crushed roses hung thick in the air, mingling with the faint tang of damp earth, a reminder that beneath every polished surface lay layers untouched. Waiting. A soft voice broke the quiet. Lydia. She turned to find Victoria, her posture less guarded now, eyes shimmering with a mix of exhaustion and resolve. The tailored lines of her suit softened in the dim light, the faintest blush blooming on her cheeks as she stepped closer. There's something else, Victoria said, voice low. Something I didn't mention before. About the second call this morning. Lydia's gaze sharpened. Go on. Victoria glanced around, as if the shadows themselves might be listening. The man who called, he wasn't just warning about you. He knew things. Things only someone inside the family could know. Details about the venue, the schedule, even the security arrangements. Lydia's fingers tightened around the glass. Marcus. Victoria nodded, swallowing. He was calm, calculated. Not like Emma. Different kind of threat. A slow smile curved Lydia's lips. So the game's deeper than I thought. And Marcus is playing for keeps. The following morning dawned pale and clear, the city's skyline etched sharply against the rising sun. Lydia stood at her penthouse window, the sprawling view of Manchester and the glistening River Irwell a reminder of battles won and those yet to come, her navy dress from the night before hung neatly on a mannequin, its silk sheen catching the light just so, elegant, understated, with a hint of defiance. She slipped on a tailored blazer, the cut sharp, precise. A modern armor for a woman who had fought her way back from the shadows. Her phone buzzed. A message from the unknown number. Asterisk, this is only the beginning. Asterisk, Lydia's eyes narrowed, a spark igniting within. She typed a reply, fingers steady. Asterisk, then let's see how the story ends. Asterisk, at Crestwood Manor. The garden stirred with the soft murmur of staff preparing for the day ahead. Anna, Lydia's trusted manager, met her at the entrance. Her smile tight but loyal. Power stable. No surprises so far. Lydia nodded, the weight of last night's revelations settling around her like a cloak. Good. Keep it that way. As she walked through the grand halls, past the crystal chandeliers and polished floors, her thoughts drifted to Marcus. The shadow lurking just beyond the light, the storm gathering in his eyes. Some battles were fought in boardrooms and ballrooms. Others in whispered threats and quiet secrets, and Lydia was ready for both. Back in the city, a figure watched from a distance, silhouette sharp against the morning light. A phone pressed to his ear, voice low and deliberate. She's awake now. And she knows. A pause. Good. Let's make sure she understands the stakes before the next move. Lydia stood once more at the window as dusk fell, the city lights flickering like distant stars awakening. The phone buzzed again. Asterisk, they see you. Asterisk, she smiled, fingers tightening around the device. Asterisk, and now, so do I. Asterisk, the night stretched before her. Dark, endless, filled with promises and shadows, and Lydia Martin was ready to step into the light. The game was far from over. The rain began as a whisper, soft droplets tapping against the towering glass windows of Lydia's penthouse. blurring the city lights into shimmering ribbons. Outside, Manchester's skyline was a restless canvas, silvered and shifting beneath the storm's gentle assault. Inside, Lydia stood poised, the fabric of her midnight blue blazer stretched taut over her shoulders, sharp tailoring tracing the lean lines of her silhouette. Her dark hair was pulled into a sleek knot, exposing the elegant curve of her neck and the glint of a delicate silver necklace. A quiet defiance against the storm both outside and within. Her phone buzzed again. A new message from the unknown number. Asterisk, they're closer than you think. Asterisk, Lydia's eyes narrowed, a flicker of amusement crossing her lips. Good, she whispered to the empty room. Closer means I'm about to see who's really playing. She slipped on a pair of black stilettos, the heels clicking sharply on the marble floor as she made her way to the door. The city, rain-washed and electric, waited below at Crestwood Manor. The usually serene gardens were transformed into a scene of muted urgency. Anna stood by the service entrance, phone pressed to her ear, her brow furrowed. There's been a breach in the security system, she reported quietly. Someone accessed the surveillance feeds last night. No signs of forced entry, but the logs show unauthorized remote access. Lydia arrived moments later, her presence commanding even in the soft glow of dawn. She studied the screen Anna held, a flickering feed from a camera near the east terrace. Marcus, Lydia said, voice low but steady. Or someone on his payroll. Anna nodded grimly. We've isolated the breach. No further access since this morning. Good. Double the patrols. And tell Victoria. She needs to know this isn't a game anymore. Later that afternoon, Lydia met with Victoria in a quiet corner of a boutique cafe nestled along Deansgate. The hum of the city outside contrasted with the tension between them. Marcus is escalating, Victoria said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. I overheard a conversation last night. He's been talking about a reset. Something that will change the family dynamic permanently. Lydia sipped her espresso, eyes cold. Then we make sure it's the last reset he ever gets to call. Victoria hesitated. There's also talk of a third party, someone outside the family. Someone who's been pulling strings from the shadows. Lydia's gaze sharpened. So the puppeteer isn't family after all. Exactly. And they're patient. Dangerous. A wry smile tugged at Lydia's lips. Patience is something I have in abundance. That evening, Lydia returned home to find a single envelope resting on her doorstep.
No markings.
No return address. Inside, a photograph. A candid shot of Marcus, standing beneath an oak tree, speaking in hushed tones with a man whose face was obscured by shadow, a note scrawled beneath. The real game begins when you don't know who's holding the pieces. Her fingers curled around the paper, pulse steady. Then it's time I learned the rules. As midnight approached, the city's pulse slowed, lights dimming under a veil of mist. Lydia stood at the window once more, the photograph pinned to the wall beside her phone. The unknown number buzzed again. Asterisk, trust no one. Asterisk, she typed back, fingers steady. Asterisk, especially not family. Asterisk, the screen glowed softly in the darkened room. A beacon amid the gathering storm. Outside, thunder rumbled. A promise of the battles yet to come, and Lydia Martin was ready to face them all.